Welcome to Tigrai Media House. My name is Meliti Brahanamascal. It has been 16 months since the war on Tigray began. Since then, more than 40 churches have been destroyed. More than 300 priests have been killed. The case for genocide is most tangible when you look at the destruction of the history, the looting of the artifacts, the priests and the religious leaders who have been executed, the nuns and the women, the elderly women who have been raped and in many cases gang raped. The impact of religion and spirituality in Tigray is undeniable. And today we're going to break down some of the most recent events that have occurred related to religion in Tigray. And our special guest today is Memher Abi. He is a church theology expert, an economist by learning, and he's also a member of the International Tigrayan Clergy Association. So Memher Abi, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me, Melita. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Start, if you can, by giving us a little bit of background on the origin of Christianity in the region and also the role of the church in the state, particularly in Tigray, but also in Ethiopia, if you don't mind, and if you can touch on some of the cultural and the political reach of the church.
Great. Thank you very much again. And when we think of religious background in the current Ethiopian surface, or you can say the East African, including Eritrea and the other, it would go way back to the Aksumite time, even before. So believing in God or practicing spiritual activities didn't start with the emerging of Christianity, the first century. It would go way back to the ancient period, and our ancestors were clearly aware of the Almighty God, and there was a clear and close connection with the Old Testament practices. We can refer Queen of Sheba, who was in Aksum and who was ruling pretty much the entire Africa. Some researchers would recommend. Some of them would consider her as a king of the eastern part and the southern Arabic Peninsula, and it can go all the way to the Madagascar area. But specifically talking, she was the leader of the Aksumite kingdom, and she was one of the historically distinguished female leaders of our history. So she went to visit King Solomon of Israel, and from her visit and from her dialogue, from her idea exchange, the people of the current East Africa were indicated as God worshipper, as a godly society, and we can see that registered at the Book of Kings, and other non-biblical sources can give us a great ground on that one. When we come to the New Testament, still the name of the area can be referred sometimes as Abyssinian, sometimes as Savian, sometimes as Ethiopian, but still the same area, which is Aksum-centered area. And the treasurer of the queen at that time went to Jerusalem to visit the Holy Land and to celebrate the Pentecoste, annual celebration. And the book of Acts, chapter 8, registered it. His visit, and he was baptized by the apostle Philip, and he went back to Aksum. And the history of Christianity started at that time, because the people at that time were pretty much believers of the Old Testament. They were waiting for the prophets, and they've been following, the David and Solomon and other Simons. And for that matter, they've been practicing the worship of the Torah and all the activities we can find in Jerusalem and its surrounding. It was also at the same time in the current place, Aksum. So
and it became a state religion, right?
Exactly. So what it makes it different is in other areas, Christianity was expanding with paying a lot of prices. After a lot of martyrs struggled, and at the end, it will be consolidated as a belief in the other countries. But when it comes to our country, it didn't happen that way. It was a peaceful integration because the people was believer, and it came through the state's personalities. Then that makes it pretty much simpler, because in other, including in Europe and the current Asia, the opponents were the state personalities, the political leaders. But when it comes to our history, the kings and the kingship society was the first to accept Christ as a Lord and Son of God. So that makes it easier to expand in the fertile of Old Testament. So this was the point. And after that, Abuna Salama came from Syria as a visitor, and it was supporting the government system at the first place because he knew Greek at that time. And Greek was pretty much international language and business language at that time. So the King Tazir of Aksum wanted his assistance in language and the communication matters, but he turned up teaching his kids at that time, Izana and Saizana, the basics of Christianity, that somehow they know about the Messiah and the Christ. And it became easier for him to teach Christianity because there was a ground who was established by the treasurer of the king of Hindake, they would call, and it was the teaching and the belief were expanded for the last 300 years, but it was not official. It was not official religion. Then by Abuna Salama, it became the church became state church, and the Christianity became the mainstream belief of that society at that time.
And Tigray in particular is, I think, if I'm not mistaken, 95% of the people are Christians, right?
Exactly, 100% in Tigray, I would say, believers in some way, but a little bit, about 5% are Muslim brothers, and the 95 are Christian. There are new developments in the Protestant, and some of them Catholic, but pretty much you can say the overwhelming majority is the Orthodox Christian because of several historical precedences. And one personality to mention on this one is Saint Yared, who was born and served church at the pretty much early stage of the church in Aksum. He accomplished a magnificent accomplishment, both in the arts way and the theological side. And he's well distinguished by even outsider researchers. During his time, there was a church separation. We're going to talk about it, maybe later, in the Europe atmosphere. And a number of spiritual fathers were coming to Aksum to seek protection and a peaceful environment for their service. Then historically, we know the 9 saints, Abuna Aragawi, Abuna Sahma, Abuna Imata, Abuna Afse, Abuna Pentelewe, and the rest. Those 9 fathers came up, and Aksum, accept them with dignity and respect. They ended up, translating a lot of New Testament books to Ge'ez, because most of them were Latin speakers and actually Greek speakers. So at that time, Greek was still, the intellectual and the business language in the Europe and Asia Minor. They helped a lot, and they established monasteries pretty much. Most monasteries, they still in Tigray, are established by the 9 saints. So Christianity was, looks like this way when it gets established in the Tigray and its surroundings.
Okay. And I want you to talk a little bit about like church governance. I know that can be kind of dry, but just a little bit of information about how is the church organized? Where is the seat of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church? Who is the head? And what are their decision-making roles?
Very good. So when we come to the church governance, well, it is a religious governance. It's not a public governance, so it follows its own teachings. So when Jesus Christ appointed the 12 apostles. They were the first leaders of the church. Then the clergyhood and the priesthood, the grace and everything were coming down from their time all the way to our era. Then, the bishops, the patriarchs are the representative of the apostles. Then they established dioceses and archdioceses. And after that, they were established local churches. So this comes from the patriarch all the way down to a local church, is the structure of the church from its, spiritual teaching and even historical development shows that kind of governance structure. So, but, the congregation members are warmly welcome to participate in decision-making through the administration structure. We know Sabaka Gubae or, the parish council, they can participate in there, and the parish council will develop up to archdiocese management. Then after that, it will come to the synod all the way back to the Holy Synod administration. So this is what the main administration structure of a church is. It is not a new development. It has been for centuries like that.
Mm-hmm. So then who is the head of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church today?
Okay, so the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, as the Oriental churches, the other Eastern Orthodox churches, pretty much they follow the same administration structure. So the head of a church is Christ in general. So because he taught us so, and the apostles taught us so, so the head of the church is Christ. But the direct representative of Christ in this world, it will be in a specific church, will be the patriarch. The patriarch is the ultimate father of the church. So he is the one who's going to appoint bishops and archbishops, and them after they will appoint priests and deacons. So the ultimate father, you call it father, general father of the church, is the representation of Christ in flesh, is the patriarch. So officially, the current Ethiopian Orthodox head is Abuna Matthias, the patriarch, even though he's not allowed to practice his authority or to take care of his responsibility. So he is the ultimate leader, but he's subject to the Holy Synod. So we do not follow a single person dominance of leadership. It is a council leadership. There is such kind of tradition in the Catholic Church, but in the Orthodoxy, we kind of follow the council leadership, which is a council of bishops. We call it synod, and the head of the synod is the patriarch.
Got it. So there was some devastating video that was circulating today. I don't know if you saw it with Abune Matthias. He was sitting at a table, and looked like there were many priests there, and they were pulling the mic from him when he was trying to speak. So he was being silenced essentially, and I'm sure that's because of his voice on the war on Tigray. Let's just talk a little bit about what's been happening. We're going to circle back to that because there is some recent news about Tigray and the Tigrayan Orthodox Church and some separations. But let's just talk for a minute about the devastation and what I call spiritual warfare that's happening in Tigray. We know there have been dozens and dozens and dozens of documented massacres in Tigray. And many of those massacres have occurred on religious days and in religious spaces and religious sites. One of which is the massacre that happened at Mariam Zion. Mm-hmm. We know that at least the numbers are at least 700, but I'm sure there are more people who were killed in that really devastating event by Eritrean soldiers. We can talk about Mariam Dengelet, which was a terrible massacre, which included 20 Sunday school children who were killed. Mm-hmm. And then we hear about, situations where in one instance, dozens of priests are killed all at the same time. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the significance of choosing these holy sites and specifically on religious days? And I mean, if we're being honest, our priests are keepers of the history, are protectors of the land. So you kill a priest, that's a big deal. So talk a little bit about why you think these specific places are being chosen and on these specific days? What is that message?
Very good. Let me begin with this. It is very disappointing when you see somebody stopping a patriarch from speaking. That is very painful, disappointing. But it is because the nation, as a social bond or as a political entity, is getting out of norms. There is no value. There is rule of law, regardless of that, but there is also almost insignificant sense of humanity in that country. That's why individuals are getting and stopping a patriarch, who is the general father, the ultimate father of the church for its spiritual activities. And even he's an elderly father for the country. He's 80-something years old.
And frankly, a voice of God. To silence the patriarch is to silence the voice of God. That's why that was so devastating to watch.
Exactly. See, the contribution of the church in history to the state's system and governance was very significant. The church was a center of intellectual contribution for the church system. Most of the historical writers, most of the lawyers and the legal experts were from the church. So the church was a huge contributor of the Ethiopian governing and state apparatus. And the church was actually promoting ethics for centuries. So the norms, the traditions, the customs are a production of the church presence in the country. And also, the church was an anchor of unity for the people. The place where people can build trust among themselves. It was a social bond, strong social bond for the different ethnic cities in Ethiopia. But because of this institutional stagnancy that's happening in the church for the last 20, 30 years, you can say, or because the church as an institution is hijacked by political motivated people, even by some associations and organizations who use the church as a coverage, and their activity and their aim, their goal, they want to accomplish is 100% different from the church's motive. We lost the contribution we should get from the church in both sides, in its own institutional progress, and at the same time, the contribution it could contribute to the state's culture of the country. That's why they're stopping their own father. And when I come to the point you mentioned, they killing clergy, they killing priestess, youngsters, Sunday school students, and the church didn't say anything. As a spiritual entity and moral center of the country, the church should be the first to speak out, stop killing innocents, leave alone its own servants, leave alone its own direct members. But we are denouncing the church right now because there is not a single value you can get from the church at this time. It's completely bankrupt institution. That's why we getting. Let me finish this point. Sure. You said why they selecting these places, why they going to Aksum and Danglat and other monasteries and killing priests and innocents, because they want to destroy the Tigrayan pride. They want to destroy the heritage. They want to destroy the sense of spiritual togetherness from the people. The leaders of this disaster may have multiple causes when they do this all distractions. Number one, like they are doing it to eliminate the people of Tigray from the face of the earth. Number two, to eliminate the orthodoxy the Orthodox Church from the surface of the country. You can say, if you destroy Aksum, what are you going to left with? And when Aksum was under direct attack and the synod didn't say anything, do you think the synod is a synod anymore? Do you think all the church apparatus, can you consider them as a spiritual entities anymore? No, because Aksum was the womb of the church. Aksum was the anchor of the history, but they do it deliberately. That's why they don't feel even guilty. This is like what I can say right now. They are doing it primarily to destroy the Tigrayan pride, because the Tigray people are Christian people to the most, 95%. So the norm, the discipline, and the legal culture we have is a product of the church's presence in the land. Mm-hmm. So if they destroy the church and the clergy and the priestess, they are shorting the time they can invest on destroying every single thing in Tigray.
Absolutely. And I mean, churches that are not even near sites where fighting is occurring are also being destroyed. I mean, you think of Dammo, the Ethiopian Air Force bombed this very historic site where there was no fighting taking place. So you're right about it being very intentional. Aksum, when I describe Aksum to foreigners, I always say Aksum is to Christians what Mecca is to Muslims. Right. So the fact that this gruesome massacre occurred in Aksum, and that every single Christian in the world is not standing up and speaking up right now. This is collective history. Christians like to talk about being one body. Well, if it's one body, the heart is bleeding right now. And Christians around the world are not taking a stand. And this is an emergency. And so if there's a message for Christian brothers and sisters around the world who are watching this show, it's what are you doing? What is your church doing as your history is being destroyed? So we like to talk about Aksum and all of these artifacts and things as ours, but they really belong to all Christians. And so, for those who don't know, Mariam Zion is where the Ark of the Covenant is held. The Ark of the Covenant is said to house the original 10 commandments, the original cup that Jesus drank from during the Last Supper, among other things. So you could see this as an attack on your very beliefs. And these things are showing up on eBay right now. You have ancient centuries old Bibles that are showing up for sale on eBay and other sites. Okay, so last week, the Tigrayan Orthodox Tewahedo Church announced its separation from the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. This week, we heard that the Tigrayan Islamic Affairs Supreme Council also said it's separating from the Ethiopian Islamic Affairs Supreme Council. I feel like this is much more significant than we can even understand right now, because it's clear that Tigrayans take their leadership from their religious institutions. And if the religious institutions are making these moves, what does that say? So first of all, tell us what the actual separation means, and then tell me how you interpret that.
All right. So separation been happening in church throughout the history, based on different measurements. For example, based on dogmatic differences, based on differences in doctrine, church has been separating. For example, go back to the fourth, 5th century. The Eastern Church and the Western Church was separated because of simply doctrine issue. Mm-hmm. There was a politics in it. The Roman empires played a significant role on the church separation because the difference came up. They want to have a strong control on the church, and the eastern side, the church didn't like it, and that developed to make even biblical interpretation differences. Then on the nature of Christ, there was differences on interpretation. Then the church split it, and we become Eastern Orthodox, and the other part became the Western Catholic. Other than that, there was no such kind of difference in a while, but in the 15th century, the Protestant movement came up, and the same reason was doctrine at the same time, and some other interpretation-wise. There was also a political reason behind it, but more specifically was religious than political. And this was the historic two main separations we can remember. The first, the Western and Eastern separation, and 16th century Protestant movement. Other than that, there is another measurement, administration separation. For example, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church were under Egypt Coptic Church for centuries. I mean, starting from the Aksumite time up to 60 years ago, our bishops were coming from Coptic Church from Cairo, and our synod was in Cairo, actually. So through several dialogues and negotiations, the Egyptians allowed us to have our own synod, and we ended up having our own synod, and we started appointing our own patriarchs and bishops and archbishops. So this was a separation following to peaceful administrational purposes. Next, we can remember the separation of the Ethiopian and Eritrean church. This was a little bit different. It was a separation following to political differences. When Eritrea declared its own independence, then the church in Eritrea had to develop its own management. Then they organized their own synod, and the Coptic church helped them. And that way they came up with their own church administration and staff. Other than that, there was no such kind of difference that we're making right now. The Tigrayan Orthodox Church and the Ethiopian Orthodox Church separation is because of a genocide. Period, right there. It was not because of a dogma or doctrine dialogue or interpretation differences. It was not a peaceful separation for administration purposes. It was not following a political separation. Then after, administration division. It is because of genocide. The church leaders in Tigray wrote several letters to the synod in Addis Ababa, calling to condemn this genocidal war, calling to help stop this genocide for the good of the people of Ethiopia in general, and the direct victim, the people of Tigray in particular. Even the church association in the diaspora, the Tigrayan Church Association, called several times for peaceful resolution so the synod can take its own responsibility, spiritual and moral responsibility. They declined to all those callings and requests. And finally, there is no religious or moral obligation for any people to work with denial organization, to work with a genocide supporter organization, so this is even for the good of the church itself, because the orthodoxy shouldn't be represented in any manner by killing, destroying an ethnic group in any way. So staying in Ethiopian Orthodox Church without questioning the activities they have been doing directly and indirectly is just supporting the genocide. So it is irresponsible to stay with the church, in the church. The Tigray people been paying numerous prices for the sake of the national unity, even the church unity. See, for the last 30 years, the Tigrinya language didn't develop even in the church. Most services were in Amharic, just simply because there would be few Amharic speaking congregation members. To police them, we use Amharic, both in diaspora and back home. All right? The Tigray people, the Tigray clergy, they've been paying numerous prices, I would say it again, to just make the situation better, but it didn't succeed. It didn't work. So at this moment, the synod itself is a criminal synod because they officially support the war. They denied the massacre in Aksum and other places of Tigray. Those places were their own places. They should protect them. They should be the first advocates for whatever happened in Tigray, because like you said, that's the people of Tigray is not just the people of Tigray. It is a congregation member of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. So the church obviously couldn't protect its own membership, its own members. So there is no single moral or spiritual ground the Tigrayan people or the Tigrayan clergy can work with the Ethiopian Synod. So finally, they are officially separated right now. It is because not dogma or doctrine or administration or political differences. It is simply because of the genocidal act and the genocidal support the church officials have been doing. And I don't think any people of goodwill can oppose the move of the Tigrayan Orthodox leaders have been doing so far.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We look to our religious institutions to be, like you said, to take a moral stance, if nothing else, a moral stance against injustice. Wow, it's a powerful, really monumental, significant event. Tell me, I've been reading and seeing comments about how this is also an opportunity for re-education that's needed specifically for Tigrayans. And you touched on it a little bit when you mentioned language in the church. You can't even use the Tigrinya language. I remember as a child, going to church, and we spoke Tigrinya at home. And so I was fluent in Tigrinya, even though I grew up, in the diaspora. But we would go to church, and although most of it is the messaging would be in Amharic and not understanding. So tell me a little bit about the re-education piece of it. And then also if you can talk about a little bit about some of the spiritual leaders and some of the spiritual teachings like Mahbara Qudbisan, if you can also break that down a little bit so people understand that. We've seen deacons, and I think Deacon Daniel Kibret is the founder of that program, but you can tell us more about that. And he has been a very loud supporter of the genocide in Tigray, and he has used some of the worst language. He said at one point, we can end this war by dropping 10 bombs, one in every city of the region. Speaking of Tigray, he has referred to Tigrayans as Satan and cancer and has called for extermination. I mean, this is a really dangerous person who had a significant role in creating teachings related to the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. So tell us a little bit about that re-education that's needed and about Mahbara Qudbisan and Daniel Kibret.
Great. That's a good point. Okay. When we establish the official Tigrayan Orthodox Synod or church administration, if we are going to follow the same way that been in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, I don't think there is no need to establish a new church. There is no need. If it was just another extension of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church in different platform, that's a huge failure. But when it's big, it's just a failed one. We need the church because the church is our home of excellence, home of ethics building, home of togetherness. It's a community. That's what is the most precious thing you get when you go to church is the communion, right? The Holy Communion. The Holy Communion makes you united in Christ. It's a community right there. That's a great place that we build brotherhood. And we appreciate each other. And we work to make our social bond stronger. If the church platform couldn't serve for these purposes, it is good for nothing. It is totally good for nothing. So, having said this, do we need re-education and correction and stuff like that? Yes, definitely, we need that. We want to take the church back to the Aksumite time. Because at the Aksumite time, the church was a center of influence for social advancement. The church was a place where intellectuals would come and enhance personality. They build professionalism. They preach brotherhood. They work for laws and orders. That's why the people is firm and is a great place for consensus building for the Tigrayan people. It is not only a place of prayer. It is not only a place where you, go there and put your frustration or something like that. It's not only pastoral consultancy place. It is a place of social advancement. That's what we have missing in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, and that is what we want to see in the Tigrayan Orthodox Church. So, and the Orthodoxy as a thought, as a school of Christianity, that is ours. We're not going to destroy it. We're not going to left it for nobody. That's ours. We're going to protect it. But in the meantime, throughout history, unbiblical teachings, traditions, norms were inserted within our number of books, within our number of traditions. We're going to clean that out. Our own saints have been condemned by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. Stephanos and his followers, the Dakika Stephanos, a man of innovations, completely spiritual person, advanced personality that we knew from Stephanos was destroyed because of wrong church leadership. If the Tigrayan Orthodox Church will be a supportive institution for the people of Tigray, the first thing the leaders of the church should announce the sainthood of the Stephanos and his followers, because they've been killed by the Raikov. And the worst thing is, we never give them the respect they deserve. And number of unbiblical thoughts were inserted in our teachings. They will be reconstructed. When I say reconstructed, it's not a reformation. The church does not need any kind of reformation. The Orthodoxy teaching is good. Our ancestors were benefited from it, and we want to be benefited fully and completely. And our coming generation will build their existence in a meaningful ground. We will work on that one. So education, re-education, construction, and reconstruction is fundamental. Having said this, you mentioned about Mahabara Kudusan. Mahabara Kudusan is an association within the church formed with the intent of spiritual services, but ended up with a political content. Nobody knew Mahabara Kudusan in this kind of form, shape, or manner. Nobody knew until it manifests by itself.
Back that up. Tell us about the origin of the organization, and then tell us what it became, because I don't think most people understand that.
Exactly. Well, during the Derg regime, pretty much youngsters were not active participants in churches. It was a communism era. Everybody was following Leninism, Marxism, and everything. Few individuals, few youngsters were in church services. You can deal with that. So when Derg regime was overthrown, a group of people who were forcibly, you can tell, in the military training centers, where Mengistu Haile Mariam spoke his last speech in the University of Addis Ababa. He called everybody in the college, in the university, and the other minor colleges to go and take military trainings and defend the PRDF forces, who were almost in the North Shawa, around Lami and the Sululta and somewhere. So the university students went to Blate Training Center, military training center. Before they finished their training, the PRDF forces controlled Addis Ababa, and Derg is overthrown. Then for their own protection, they went to Kenya. From the military camp, they went to Kenya. They asked political protection, and the government of Kenya gave them a place to live in. General Hayolom Araya, one of the famous generals of the Tigrayan movement, and finally general of the PRDF government, he went to Kenya and he spoke with them because most of them were youngsters, and they forced to go to the military training. They gave them a second chance to go back to school and finish their study. Okay, so during their Kenya stay, they established a little associations, prayer associations by the name of Saint Michael, by the name of Saint Abuna Tekla Haymanot or whatever. When they come back to Addis Ababa University, those small associations reunified, and they established Mahabara Kudusan as a spiritual association, and the association was given a legal personality by the church administration, and they allowed to work on colleges because college students at that time was lacking spiritual teaching. So there was cultural shock. When you go to college, you only studied academics, you are separated from the people, you don't go to church and everything. So they see that, well, the future of the church will be in damage if we did not teach the youngsters on time. Well, honestly, that was a good attempt, but there was a hidden agenda on it. At that time, PRDF controlled the military, the politics, and everything. So people who are left over of the Derg regime or the other communist movements at that time, they had no place to hide themselves other than the church. All right. So they went there, they get a good package to cover themselves. People who were soldiers, they become priests, deacons, even bishops. Nobody from the Tigrayan intellectuals never worried about this. Okay, the prior force who caused this genocidal crisis in Tigray is this association. Because from its very establishment, political entities went there and helped establish this association in the name of spiritual service, in spiritual service intention, but political content, political agenda was hidden in it. Then it took them 30 years to mobilize people in churches, to mobilize people in civil societies, to mobilize people even in political parties. Then they used the advantage of the Cairo and Fano movement the last 4 or 5 years. They finally controlled everything. And look, Daniel Kubrat, you mentioned his name. He is simply an outcome of the state failure, an outcome of the church failure. When state fails, a personality like Daniel Kubrat would come up and control the media. When a church fails, a person like Daniel Kubrat would come and control the mainstream. And they will represent the nation, they will represent the church. Mm-hmm. If there was a healthy condition in a church, Daniel Kubrat should have no place at all. Leave alone to represent in higher government official, he should be nobody because he does not have a proper church training.
Hmm.
He was a soldier. He came back and joined Mahabara Kudusan, and he was one of the founding members actually. And he become so-called deacon. He doesn't have the qualities or the trainings to be a deacon. He used that name to get a public attention. And finally, he utilized that public attention for a destroyal activities against the people of Tigray.
You said something powerful. The people who were committing genocide on Tigrayans then turned around, infiltrated the churches and the faith associations, and then were able to create these sort of perverted teachings that are once again supporting genocide. I think that's really powerful to recognize that. Let me ask you this. I know that the religious institutions have not spoken against the war, and in some cases are even seen blessing the war when they bless soldiers who are going to Tigray. And do you feel like the let's talk about the congregation as a whole, the believers. Why do you think that Ethiopia, this so-called very spiritual and religious place, regardless of what faith you follow, you can be an Orthodox Christian, a Catholic, a, whatever, Protestant, a Muslim, why do you think that a place that supposedly had such a strong moral fiber has been silent as weaponized rape and weaponized hunger and, all of the atrocities that are happening, including against priests and nuns? And, why do you think the greater bodies of religious people are silent throughout all of this? Are they afraid? Are their leaders that powerful that they can't speak out? Or are we really lacking, what do you think?
All right. It is very insane to imagine there was spirituality in the Ethiopian culture. This is very dangerous. If there was somehow, nobody blacked it right now to manifest. We should see it somehow. See, we had exaggerated image of what the Ethiopianism is, what the Ethiopian Orthodox, even the Ethiopian culture itself is hypocrite culture. We would say we are 100% religious, we are spiritualists, even God blessed Ethiopia and we are here in there was a potential. There was a potential that we could be blessed because God gave us a lot of graces, but did we use it? No. So go back 50 years ago, 40 years ago, when the church patriarch was killed by the Derg regime, nobody said anything. All right? So there was exaggerated thought on the honesty or spirituality of the people. There was not. Why? Because the institutions, how do you make a word, informed, firm society? If you have informed and firm social institutions, yes, you can have that kind of people. All right. See, the civil societies in Ethiopia never say anything. Religious organization in Ethiopia never said anything, even to call for peace, to denounce the destroyer activities. They are partial, they are biased, and they know what they're doing. They just want to destroy Tigray. That's all. They are not in ambiguity. They are clear. They are clear with what they are doing. We are in ambiguity. We are trying to give still extended hearts. Well, okay, why do the people, they cannot speak out against? Because they didn't want to speak out. Was there any spirituality? Never been. All right? For example, let's just assume this way. If you don't have any money in your pocket and somebody asks you, what do? You don't give out because you do not have. So there was wrong perception among us when it comes about the Ethiopian Orthodox, even the other religions, even the Ethiopian culture by itself is hypocrite culture. I can guarantee. Because if he was honest, okay, there were few individuals, they spoke out, like you can call Lidetu Ayalo and the like, to stop the genocide against Tigray. They would come, if you go to church, they would tell you Jesus likes you or loves you, right? Somebody who Jesus Christ died for in Aksum or Dangalat is killed because he's a Tigrayan and you don't say anything, you are not a Christian. All right, this is just simple hypocrisy. That's what we want even to avoid among us. All right, we have to be straightforward. We have to be firm in what we are following. And we have to take a serious lesson from what's happening in Ethiopia.
Wow. This is such an interesting conversation, and we could go on for much longer, but last question, and then I want to give you sort of, the final word, or maybe it's not even a question, but it's been 16 months since Tigray has been under siege and since the genocide began. And clearly from the start, the message from Tigrayans has been muted. There's no communication coming out of the region. There's no phones, no internet. But it seems like through their religious leaders, Tigrayans are speaking loudly. And this may be the most clear message that we've gotten based on the separation of the Tigrayan Orthodox Church and the Islamic Affairs Council. I think that Tigray is speaking loudly through their religious leaders. And so we'll wait to see how much more we get and what this means for the people. I want to give you the final words. Thank you for being with us, Mamhar Abi, and please close us out.
All right. I would give a couple of points as a closure. Number one, in somehow, if the international community is listening to what I'm saying, they have to know that the Ethiopian arrangement is failed arrangement. The Ethiopian future lost a social fabric. See, if the church leaders disconnected from the Addis Ababa administration, even if the Muslim Council leadership disconnected from Addis Ababa leadership, what is left? And I always wonder how people imagine about political togetherness. Political unity is an outcome of social togetherness. If we are socially accept each other, if we are welcome to each other, with, for each other, there is higher possibility to design a political framework so we can live together. If we don't have any social fertile ground for political arrangement, you don't even start thinking about it. So please, lawmakers, policymakers who get a chance to listen to this message, you need to frame your policies based on what's going on the ground, not based on your assumptions or even your political interest. On the ground, there is no single attachment that can help people of Tigray and Ethiopia live together. Help them to be good neighbors. Help them to manage their business individually, because if they cannot pray together in the same church, how do you expect them to work together in the same parliament? If they cannot pray together in the same mosque, how do you expect them to run for the same political party? If somebody closed all the banks, how do you expect somebody else to put his money or her money in the same monetary institution? So this is not a matter of humanity or something like that. This is a matter of being a healthy thinker or not. And for youngsters who are listening to me here in the diaspora, Tigrayan heritage diaspora, young professionals, this is time for you to know better about the church, to fix its defective features, and to make it a church that you can like it. A church that you would love to spend your time in. A church that you want to raise your kids, because you need that anyway. Because that's the center of togetherness, center of spiritual and social excellence. And for that matter, we, the Tigrayan clergy members in the diaspora, are launching a media soon. We will use Tigrinya and English as a way of instruction. So Zion Media will be launched soon, both in Tigrinya and the English. And please, that will be your media. And we're gonna ask TMH one day to give us airtime to announce about it or to discuss about it specifically. But once I get a chance right here for the English speaker youngsters who can listen to me, Zion Media is coming for you. Rally around it, help it, and we will make Tigray a place where nobody can attempt to destroy. Right. We will make it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate your time, Mamhar Abi, and that's Zion Media. So we look forward to learning more about that media and more about the church. You've given us so much to think about in terms of the changes that need to happen internally, what this new separation means. And if the Tigrayan church or the other Orthodox churches weren't showing leadership in the past, they're certainly showing leadership right now with some of the recent developments. So we look forward to that, and we'll keep watching that. Your plea was to politicians. My plea is to spiritual and religious leaders throughout the nation and throughout the world. if the Christian body is truly one body, then we're hurting right now. And so I hope that someone will hear or see this show and understand the devastation that is happening in Tigray. So thank you, Memher Abi, for your time, and I look forward to speaking with you again.
Thank you, Melody, and thank you, TMH, at the same time.